I look forward to an interesting state of the industry presentation and MOSAIC review. There's still quite a few things we don't know about the standards, the ASTM standards that support the MOSAIC rule. We do know quite a bit, and to the extent that we know, I'll try and share some of that as we go forward. LAMA, the Light Aircraft Manufacturers Association, is a not-for-profit trade association. We advocate for manufacturers and suppliers to the light aircraft industry. LAMA members are manufacturers of light aircraft, sport aircraft similar to sport, kits, engines, propellers, parachutes, avionics, and suppliers to the light aircraft industry. To LAMA, light aircraft includes all categories and classes of aircraft or flying craft up to 4-seat capacity, microlight, ultralight, and emerging designs such as eVTOLs. Here's a key point about LAMA, and this is defining. LAMA members provide aircraft and components that meet Civil Aviation Authority safety requirements worldwide through self-declarative means of compliance. This means aircraft that don't require a type certificate. Sport aircraft are self-declarative. The manufacturer declares the design and production conforms to the ASTM standards. Ultralights are self-declarative. The manufacturer declares the design is compliant to the definition. And then microlights and ultralights in Europe and other parts of the world are self-declarative as well. Some of them are certificated in another fashion, but generally self-declarative. So let's look at trends in these light sport areas. We'll look at different groupings of light sport aircraft. SLSA is a special light sport aircraft. This includes only factory-built, ready-to-fly aircraft. SLSA can be used for compensation or compensated operations like flight instruction and rental. ELSA, or experimental light sport aircraft, are factory-built kits and converted to SLSA. When built, an ELSA must conform to its SLSA origin. ELSA allow expanded maintenance privileges and some changes without factory approval. An owner can change avionics, interiors, engine changes, that sort of thing, various equipment on an ELSA, but an ELSA cannot be used for compensated flight instruction or aircraft rental. Then EAB, or experimental amateur built kits. EAB are different from ELSA, and we hear often that I want to convert my SLSA to experimental because then I can do the maintenance and other advantages, but it's actually changing it from special light sport aircraft to experimental light sport. It doesn't go all the way over to experimental amateur built because you didn't build the airplane. So it's a different set of privileges for an ELSA than it is an EAB. Let me see, then the two remaining smaller by number categories include experimental exhibition category. This is used recently, most recently by Pipistrel for its motor glider models, and a few other aircraft that have come in for exhibition because there are restrictions on where you can fly an exhibition category aircraft. And primary category that presently counts pretty much only auto gyro, the gyrocopter, as there was no other reasonable mechanism for certification for gyroplanes. Earlier models, when we go way back, and there are a few of there that are approaching my age out there, would remember the Quicksilver GT500. That was under primary category, but those haven't really been, they really haven't carried on a whole lot. So here we have factory-built light sport and experimental amateur-built kits. Oh good, that's pretty visible. In the back, can you make those numbers out all right? This information is current as of July 6th of this year, just a month ago or so. There are presently 5,873 factory-built aircraft. That includes SLSA, ELSA, primary, and exhibition. At the end of 2024, there were 5,809, so a growth of 64 registrations at mid-year. May, June, so about half the year. For kits, 2024 had an accumulated total of 4,390, and just over 6 months into the year, another 63 had been added for a total of 4,453. So that's a total of 10,326 registrations in the U.S. through July of this year. Now let's break this down a little bit. The experimental number at the top remains the same. We're breaking down factory built. So factory built includes SLSA, ELSA, exhibition, and primary category. The others that I suppose the FAA didn't know what to do with, there's 27 of those, I'm not sure what they are. Of the 5,873 factory built, you can see SLSA is the largest segment, followed by ELSA, exhibition, and in primary. But to understand the market, we need to look really more at the yearly registrations versus just totals of these classes. So this is yearly registrations by certification type. This shows the surge of the introduction of light sport, SLSA and ELSA, which started in 2005. You can see that blue line at the top, that's experimental amateur build, has pretty much held its own. Then the yellow and orange lines, those are S and ELSA, have been a little less consistent. Overall, we see a gradual market decline across all registration types though, with ELSA having probably the most negative trend and sharply dropping after 2023. I mean, this is interesting information and certainly not new for us manufacturers. Look at the number one in the square over on the kind of the left side, left high. That's 2007, and there you see the spike of 302 each of the yellow SLSA and orange ELSA. Then there's a number two kind of down and to the right. In 2010, that yellow line, of the 234 SLSA, 120 were Cessna Skycatcher. I mean, you know, it's iconic for our industry. The orange line right below is ELSA, and of the 130 something, 53 were vans. I mean, this information is just fascinating as you start pouring and digging through it, if you're a little bit nerd-like. So that's airplanes. Let's look at engines though. This has to be qualified. As often the engine is not well spelled out in the FAA database, and all this information comes from the FAA database. There's quite a bit of sifting and sorting that goes on. But you see about 465 unknowns. I mean, that's a big number statistically. What we can see is there are a lot of manufacturers, engine manufacturers in the market, clearly led by Rotax. And hats off to them. They've done such a instrumental in our industry even being here. So let's move on to aircraft manufacturer and model growth. In the LSA world, flight design continues to hold on to its historical lead. The Carbon Cub, a decidedly different type of LSA and flying, it's got a different mission, has followed close behind. Interesting to watch their path as they started a little bit later, but boy, really gained in popularity. And with all the missteps and brouhaha of Icon, 187 is not a figure to be embarrassed by. And look at the historic and lasting impression from the Skycatcher. There it is, that flat brown line that kind of comes up and goes. Real important to the industry for one, when Cessna got involved, it really validated the light sport industry, right? People thought, gosh, if Cessna's getting involved, this must be real. And while that didn't wind up being a successful thing for Cessna, it was surely important to our light sport industry. So thanks to Jack Pelton for all of that. So let's look at ELSA. I think it's no surprise that Van's RV-12 is well in front of the total ELSA registrations. And then look at parachute. Holy cow, powered parachutes. are very popular. Between their two models, that's 284 registrations. Then Carbon Cub comes in behind vans, as many owners converted to ELSA Carbon Cub. It was an interesting manufacturing strategy or distribution strategy to sell as SLSA and then quickly convert to ELSA so that they could equip the plane a little differently. Speaking of conversions, Flight Design CT has quite a high number of ELSA, but they never did ELSA. The interesting story behind that is that because they were one of the first manufacturers with the most airplanes out there, and they started early when the Rotax 15-year life limit became obvious, 12-year and 15-year life limit came out. If you converted to ELSA, you wouldn't be subject to the Rotax or to the mandated life limit of the engine. So people said, okay, I'll convert to ELSA. And so I shouldn't say it was Rotax's mandate, Rotax suggested, and then the manufacturers, the airframe manufacturers, then follow suit with that and say you should do what the engine manufacturer suggests. And that whole thing has been a point of contention for many years as well. But at any rate, that's where the CT ELSA come from, is because they were so successful early on, then the engine timeout caught up with those owners. Next up, experimental amateur built. It's a different world for experimental amateur built. While there are many pilots, and just go to Oshkosh and see the beautiful airplanes that fly into that show, these are craftsmen that enjoy building. An SLSA or an ELSA owner is oftentimes not a builder. For builders, the fun, is in the journey, and then to get to fly that you've crafted with your two hands is a pretty spectacular feeling. Also, it's easier to manufacture a kit than it is to manufacture a flying aircraft. So there are more kit manufacturers than factory-built manufacturers out there. So let's look at recent trends in kits. Alrighty. This is annual registrations for 2023, 24, and 2025, so far in 25, versus accumulated totals, which is what we've been looking at before. The chart on the left is for manufacturer, which includes all models by the manufacturer, and the chart on the right counts just specific models, so you have to read those two a little bit differently. And likely no surprise, Rand's aircraft is now leading the way, in a large part because Randy's outbound is inbound now. That S-21 is quite he hit the nail on the head with that. For kit planes, these are registrations, and some registrations occur at the time of sale, and some occur after the plane is completed. So these are not really annual sales numbers, but they do reflect what's been sold. So there can be a little bit of a buffer there on date-wise. I touched on this a minute ago. The data is good and very descriptive, and definitely depending on how you drill down and sort. And when you understand the process, it helps understand the validity of the data and what an accurate look into the industry. The information is harvested by Steve Best, an industry guy who we've known for years and years. He's a retired software engineer. Steve sifts through the FAA computer records to distill this information that we report on. He applies his technical skills, which are many, to the information, so to make sure that the information is consistent. His understanding of the industry helps reconcile the information, keeping it accurate and relevant. Oftentimes, when aircraft are registered in the FAA database, if the manufacturer enters the information or there is an employee change at the manufacturer, it might be listed a little bit differently. So, for example, in Jabiru, we've got several different models: the 250 SP, the 230 SP, the 230D, and the Calypso, and the 160 and the 170. Oftentimes it's just Jabiru. Well, none of the 230Ds are even listed in the FAA database. For some reason, I'm not sure, and there's clerical error at the FAA. But Steve understands a lot of this, and so he can pull out by looking at each record and reconcile these areas that he knows. Oh yes, I know what this is and what this is. So it's really invaluable to making this the most accurate view we have of the industry. So let's look at, well, and the program that's used is Tableau Public, which is a terrifically a relational database. So let's look at factory built. Again, the last 2.5 years, remember, factory built includes SLSA, ELSA, exhibition, primary category, and those 24 or 25 other. Once again, the chart on the left is for the manufacturer, which includes all the models by a manufacturer, and the chart on the right counts specific models. Sometimes the left chart, there's a model listed for the manufacturer that acts as a placeholder for all the models. You got to put something there, and so just by the way the data is. And so just understand that. You can see that with Pipistrel. It takes a little bit of looking at, but you can see trends there, even just from 23 to 24 to 25. The Vans RV12 over on the left side has seen a little bit of a decline. Pipistrel as well, you can see those changes. So your order is a little different depending on which year you're looking at. What manufacturers have the all-time most kits and aircraft out there? I thought I heard somebody ask. Well, as of July 6th, in terms of accumulated sales for kit-built aircraft manufacturers on the left and specific models on the right. So you'll see of note is Zenith, who occupies the first aggregate position on the left with 1,030, and the top 3 slots with 3 different models on the right. And the 3 models on the right don't quite add up to that because they've got other models as well. But I'm sure you can find your favorite manufacturer or model. This is, I took like the top 15, but it goes on and on and on. At some place you just got to decide to move and draw a line. Let's look at SLSA. This is where we are today in terms of accumulated sales for specifically SLSA aircraft. Again, note the difference between manufacturer on the left and specific models on the right. As you saw in the earlier graph, CT is on top of both sides. The numbers may be a little different because manufacturers have different models, right? Even the CT had a few different models coming up. The CTLS, the SI, and then the MT, I think. Number 3, Tectum on the left side is just called P2008, but as you know, they manufacture several models, so they're all just lumped into the P208 bracket. Aviation Ranger there is a strong upcoming sling aircraft, and Progressive Aerodyne Sea Ray. You know, they're not in production presently, it looks like, but they sure have a strong hold in the amphibian market. There's Parachute, Icon holding on there with their 187. Yeah, Jabiru and Sling over here, and Remos from way back. Here's the factory-built aircraft. So this is SLSA, ELSA, exhibition, primary category, and those 23 or 24 other. So, and as you've seen, as opposed to just showing the top 2 or 3, I presented a wider view. helps you, particularly over time, understand the shifts in the manufacturers and their design strategies. Okay, so there's a high-level look at what MOSAIC brings. Much of this we know, but in high-level terms, there are some things that that make a statement. We know the 59 knots clean stall speed for sport pilots, 59 calibrated airplanes, and 45 for gliders and weight shift control, 61 landing speed for light sport aircraft, different from what the sport pilot can fly. So you have the sport pilot eligible aircraft, which we'll discuss here in a minute, in a few slides, versus the light sport aircraft. And those have been split apart. The light sport aircraft has a 250 knot maximum speed, 4 seats allowed, but a sport pilot can only fly with one other occupant. Multi-engine is allowed. That's pretty significant. A twin engine light sport aircraft. Electric propulsion is allowed, so that brings in the eVTOL, so we could see electric 2-seat light sport aircraft and eVTOLs. Turbine propulsion is allowed. Variable pitch is allowed. Retractable gear is allowed, and that will take, for a sport pilot, will take additional sign-offs. But the aircraft, it's allowed in the light sport aircraft. Powered lift are allowed, and night flight is allowed for the sport pilot with the basic med and endorsement. 2 of the primary missions of MOSAIC were to revitalize general aviation, which I didn't realize until I got involved in the ASTM committee meetings and working with the FAA pretty diligently. I thought it was just to help light sport aircraft, but no, Mr. Severin, it is to revitalize general aviation, and the way to do that is to revitalize and expand light sport aircraft, because that's the stepping stone, can be the stepping stone for everyone coming into aviation. And the other primary mission was to make flying more simple and hence safer. First, before we get into some of the technicalities, here's the reasoning behind the whole MOSAIC process. An important concept at the FAA is the safety continuum, and you'll hear this phrase often if you delve into these discussions. The safety continuum is a principle that guides the agency's approach to regulating aviation safety. It moves away from a one-size-fits-all approach that we have had in Part 23. The flexible framework allows the FAA to balance the safety risks with the needs of the aviation industry and the flying public, while also encouraging innovation. The encouraging innovation is significant. Part 23 certification, like Cessna, Piper, and all those, it takes years and years and years and years and years to do rule change. So you don't have innovation. It's costly, and it takes a long time. And then light sport came along a little while back, and my goodness, the FAA and all the traditional manufacturers are going, holy cow, look at the equipment in that airplane and look at the capability of this airplane. And it really, really opened up the eyes. The other real important success story of light sport aircraft is it was creating aircraft through industry consensus standards, which is something that FAA had never done before. And so the light sport rule proved that manufacturers can manufacture a product, and the FAA doesn't have to have a heavy-handed oversight, and it can be successful. In fact, light sport safety records are outstanding, very acceptable to the FAA. So what's important to FAA, of course, is safety. And so as the idea came about to revitalize general aviation, they also wanted to they know that means keep making things more sophisticated. As pilots, we want more speed and more power. And so they wanted to keep that safe, or make it safer, in fact. And so the safety continuum then is their way, and light sport is their way of allowing innovation and putting some limitations on it, and reducing some of the FAA oversight compared to Part 23, and increasing some in some areas over the original ASTM process that we've utilized. Some points of this graphic. Increasing the scope of LSA continues the tailoring philosophy from Part 23. It makes the safety benefits of LSA more accessible, reducing reliance on experimental amateur-built aircraft. And we'll see when we look at some safety figures in a little bit that experimental aircraft have become more safer, but light sport and experimental light sport have had better safety records, and of course that's what FAA is after, is getting flight safe across the spectrum. And so they see this MOSAIC as creating more availability of the SLSA and ELSA to bring more safety to flying. LSA can be an entry point for innovative technologies that can grow along the spectrum, and you can see that occurs through here with the experimental amateur built in the lower left green, and the experimental operations, and the original LSA rules in the tan box, and the light sport operations here, and the big tan box of MOSAIC expansion, and then the standard and recreational operations going up to Part 23 airplanes and Part 27 helicopters and novel aircraft. And then up here the turboprop and passenger, which is way beyond what we're doing. But this area is absolutely where we really are. Separates the operational airworthiness aspects more clearly for sport pilot and simplified flight controls. I mean, how is all of this working so far? I mean, I think pretty doggone well. Here's some accident records. If we look at fatalities, you can see on the chart on the left, accidents per 100,000 hours. Experimental amateur built, as I mentioned earlier, the safety is improving. The blue line, LSA has gotten right there with T-seat aircraft. The green line, and on the right chart, which is accident counts, EAB and LSA have fewer accident counts than GA, but there are fewer LSA and EAB than Part 23 aircraft. So that makes sense. But it is fascinating to see the similarities, and I am so proud to see this green line coming right here again with the general aviation world, and so is the FAA. Hence, we've got MOSAIC. So we can get into some frequently asked questions that we get at LAMA, both from manufacturers and suppliers, and many of the public and pilots, sport pilots to be, or people looking at becoming sport pilot. This information comes from the published MOSAIC rule and direct communications with Brian Cable and Jim Newberger. Brian Cable is FAA AIR 630. He's the manager of that division of organization and system policy, which is what MOSAIC falls under. And then Jim Newberger is AIR 632. He's the production and airworthiness. Jim is the man that wrote most of MOSAIC. He's the most intimately familiar with MOSAIC as anyone on the planet. Here we go. When is it real? There's kind of two dates here. Sport pilot privileges to fly existing, newly defined LSA aircraft take effect on October 22nd of this year. That is a sport airman can fly an existing aircraft that meets the new definition, whether it's an existing airplane or a new airplane, so long as it meets our current 1320. All the existing light sport are going to meet 1320. But there's a whole cadre of aircraft out there, probably 60 to 70% of the general aviation fleet, that will become sport pilot eligible. whether you're a sport pilot airman or you're a private pilot exercising sport pilot privileges. So that means you can fly any sport pilot eligible aircraft regardless of the aircraft certification basis. Then what I'll refer to as MLSA, or the new SLSAs, M for MOSAIC, those won't be available until July 24th of 2026, legally available, and then there's the logistical side of that. Sport pilot privileges to fly existing, newly defined existing aircraft take effect October 22nd. How and what can we fly? As a sport pilot or private pilot who has not been denied a medical, you can fly with a current and valid driver's license in place of the FAA medical or basic med. Light sport has always been the easiest way to fly. If you're a private pilot, you can just go fly as a sport pilot if your medical has never been declined. Any sport pilot eligible aircraft with a clean stall speed of 59 knots calibrated or less and a maximum level flight speed of 250 knots calibrated, and max weight is not a part of the discussion. So right there, that statement shows you it just opens up what's available for a sport pilot. An aircraft can have up to 4 seats, but as a sport pilot, you can only fly with 1 extra occupant, as we mentioned. No additional paperwork or check rides for sport pilots or private pilots are hired. Just understand and fly within the sport pilot privileges. In addition, with the appropriate training and endorsements, a sport pilot will be able to fly an aircraft with a controllable pitch propeller and or retractable landing gear, and at night with either an FAA medical or basic med. So how and what can I fly? So the older 2-seat trainers, Cessna 120, 140, 150, 152, the Tomahawk, the Beechcraft Skipper, the Grumman AA-1, and Ercoupe. When we get into legacy 4-seat aircraft, the 170, the 172, except the IO360 powered variants, like the 172K and such, the 175, the 172D, a 182 up through a 182D. Then in the Piper PA-28 series, aside from the Cubs and whatnot, of course, the 140, 150, 160, 180, 181 Archer 3, Beechcraft Bonanza, older ones. The deal is they just have that VS under 59 clean, and so some of the like a V35B probably fits that. So you just need to check the POH. But that, holy cow, that's 75% of the airplanes out at flight schools. This MOSAIC is huge for the flight training community, right? All this, it was in June, it was hard to find a light sport aircraft at a flight school, right? You had to hunt it down and find it. And now, over half the flight schools have light sport aircraft, or soon will have that. Truly a game changer. So do I have to do anything different to keep flying my current 1,320-pound SLSA models? No, existing LSA or SLSA continue to operate as before. Nothing needs to be done to the plane or to the pilot. So do you have to do anything different to fly a new MLSA built in about a year? As a sport pilot, no. Your privileges will be expanded to include the new definition of aircraft. In fact, that occurs in October. Appropriate training and endorsements will be required for LSA with controllable pitch propeller and or retractable landing gear. With that said, as in all regulations, there are definitions and tentacles that reach in many directions. Let's see, where can I find the new regulations? The final rule is published in the Federal Register at federalregister.gov. Llama has a link to the final rule on our website as well, and that is here. If you go to our website, you'll see the MOSAIC thing, and that link takes you not only to the final rule, but many fascinating documents that are related to the development of the rule and and all things MOSAIC. And then the only, who was it you remember that you can contact if you want to join ASTM? That was Linda Salters. If you want faster LSAs or want LSAs faster, contact Linda and she'll be able to get you on one of the committees. It all happens through WebEx or Zoom, so it's good to help. I hope it's been informative for you all.